What's up, everybody? This will be a somewhat interesting and definitely a fun video, so I hope you stick around. Shout out to everybody who commented on my last video. As expected, there was some dissent and definitely misinterpretation. I would encourage everybody to listen, and if you need to listen again, and maybe again. Think about what's being said and then comment. Maybe read some of the comments before you do comment yourself. Maybe it'll help you understand what's going on. Really think about what it is you're about to say, which you should do anyway. But, just getting triggered and responding, you may just step in doo-doo. So let me help you clean that shit off your shoe. Some of you anyway. If you like the kind of work that I do here, do consider supporting this demonetized channel. Links in the description. At any rate, just FYI, I wasn't really making statements about what it is that I believe. I could see how maybe it was misinterpreted as that. The only thing that I did with my previous video was compare the evidence that we have for the existence of someone like Jesus versus George Washington. And insofar as you and I are concerned, the evidence is more or less the same, right? But somehow people don't expect, they seem to have a lower burden of proof when it comes to someone like Washington versus Jesus. All of a sudden, to prove that Jesus existed, you need so much more and quote-unquote better proof than George Washington. Well, that's a hypocrisy, right? It's a little bit ridiculous. Whatever you believe, well, I mean, ultimately, it's just belief, right? Belief. That's all that it is. But the level of proof, again, that we have for someone like George Washington, as explained in that video, is more or less the same as we have for someone like Jesus. And yet, one supposedly existed according to a lot of people, and the other guy never did. Right? You're a hypocrite. Anyway, I'm going to be answering mostly Fox Strike's comments, as he, I'm sure, encapsulates a lot of different people's attitude, the same attitude that a lot of different people have. So we're just going to pick on the Fox. Similar to science, history is constantly reevaluated. Well, I mean, that may be true, but history is history. It's written, it's recorded, it is what it is. Interpreting history, I mean, yeah, when you have conflicting sources or two different sources that say a different thing, I mean, or new sources come up, right? We find new historical records. Yeah, it might make sense. It does make sense sometimes in some instances to, I wouldn't say reevaluate history, but just, reconsider whether what we believed before is true or not true. That's not evaluating it necessarily, but maybe I'm just playing semantics. Something might be found that makes Washington a hoax. I wasn't saying Washington was a hoax. I never said any of that, so that's a strawman argument, if indeed it is an argument levied against my video. However, there's a bit of false equating going on here. No sources on Washington claim that he was divine, died for sins, and magically got resurrected and is alive in heaven forgiving sins to this day. Well, I never said there are those sources, so that's a strong argument. Nor did I say that if there are sources claiming that about Jesus, that's true or you should believe it. I wasn't breaking down what it is that they did or what's reported that they did or what their lives entailed, right? All I'm saying is that the evidence that we have for whatever they did is exactly the same, okay? Now, just because Washington's deeds may seem believable, right? That doesn't mean that they're true either, right? But simply because it would seem, a lot of what's reported about Washington is believable, then people seem to automatically think that he's somehow truer, right? Like, what, people can't lie? If you're saying that people made a mistake or lied about Jesus because the things that he did are unbelievable, a lot of them, that's ultimately just your belief. They said about Washington that he never lied in his entire life, never told one lie. Now, how believable is that? Right? So just because they said that about Washington, I guess he never existed, because that's not believable. And you're dead wrong. Like, you don't even know what you're talking about. You're dead fucking wrong. The apotheosis of Washington, right? Is the fresco painted by Greek-Italian artist Constantino, blah, blah, blah. They basically present George Washington in heaven, sitting among angels, divine figures, or, forgive me if my terminology is incorrect, okay? I'm not a biblical scholar. But basically, they show you Washington in heaven, right? That's part of the myth of Washington. Yep, he was resurrected. The apotheosis of Washington depicts George Washington sitting amongst the heavens in an exalted manner, in literal terms, ascending and becoming a god. Yeah, some people are claiming he was a god. I guess he never existed. This is the fucking logic that I have to deal with here. There's this book written about George Washington where the author calls him a demigod, right? Literally what, according to some interpretation, I'm not a religious scholar, okay? But to a common man's, I guess, secular understanding of the word demigod, it's like half man, half God, right? Jesus was born of Mary. Now, I get it. Some people might say that she was divine or whatever. Okay, fine. But to, more of a secular understanding of the word demigod, that's exactly who Jesus was, right? Born of a woman and God, right? So he was that's just one interpretation, right? So according to that interpretation, and there you go, 'tis only Washington, the hero and the demigod, right? They even capitalized it. They essentially equated him to Jesus. So what are you talking about? So just because there are some people who said that he was like Jesus, that means he didn't exist? This is your whacked out fucking quote unquote logic. There's also a verse in here where they call him a thunderbolt of war, right? Well, I mean, that's a metaphor basically, right? Or is it an analogy? Maybe it's a simile. I think it maybe qualifies as a metaphor, right? Thunderbolt of war. Was he that? Or is this a lyrical device, right? Is this prose? Right? What is Bible? Well, it's poetry. Now, granted, some people say the King James Version was written or rewritten by Francis Bacon, a Freemasonic poet, right? So Bible is poetry also, right? So there's going to be, perhaps, look, I'm not telling anybody how to interpret the Bible, but this could be one way, especially if you're some secular, quote unquote, scientist, right? Why would you take a literal reading of the Bible? Why would you do that? You reject that, right? You reject the literal reading of the Bible and say it's silly, and then you use the literal reading of the Bible to disprove the Bible, to disprove that Jesus existed. You're refuting yourself. Why are you taking a literal reading of the Bible? If you're some secular scientist, why aren't you taking the same approach to the Bible as you do to George Washington? Clearly, they called him a god. They called him basically Jesus. They said he went to heaven. He was a thunderbolt of war, right? But all of that, oh, that's just poetry. It's exaggeration. It's prose. It's not meant to be taken literally. You have a double standard, dummy. You don't agree with the religious people, okay? And yet you're assuming their interpretation of the Bible to disprove him when you don't even believe that. Like, how unintelligent can you be? Or dishonest? What is it? You tell me. You let me know. Okay, so you're full of shit. You don't even know what you're talking about. Yeah, a lot of people thought Washington was God. They did. Or God's son or whatever. He was a thunderbolt. Right? Which means, according to your whacked out logic, it means he didn't exist. Like, how? I'm sorry, guys, but this is just... this is why we're in the pickle that we're in, because people are intellectually dishonest, they're hypocritical, they don't make any sense, they refute themselves, they're bigoted, they're super bigoted, they have a double standard. What else do we got? If he survived the cross and did not resurrect and go to heaven as per Christianity, what? Resurrected. Magically got resurrected. Okay. Well, first and foremost, I'm going to tell you a little anecdotal story. And, people who are bigoted like that, I often wonder if they just haven't experienced life. They haven't stepped out of their bubble. They haven't explored even their own surroundings, you know what I mean? They just live. I think in order to be that closed-minded, your life has to be closed off to a lot of experiences in some way, shape, or form, okay? For example, I'm going to give you a personal anecdote, and I have so many things I could tell you, things that I've experienced that you'll call me crazy. And I'm not going to share these things, maybe one day. But this is why I believe, because of what I experienced. But that's personal, right? And we're going to keep it that for now. But one little thing. One day, my wife took a machete and took that machete to a rooster's head, right? She put a big cut, didn't completely sever it, put a big cut in the head. The chicken bled and stopped moving eventually and died. We thought he did, right? So she left him there to bleed, went to do something else, and was going to get to it later. And then she comes back, and the chicken's gone. Yeah? There's a big blood puddle, bloody machete, no chicken. And then the next morning, we find him walking around eating with a big fucking cut in his head. So, was the chicken resurrected? Well, that's one interpretation. This is fun. Mike the Headless Chicken was a chicken that lived for 18 months after his head had been cut off. After the loss of his head, Mike achieved national fame until his death in March 1947. 18 months with no head. Walked around, scratched around, did all the things that chickens do. And maybe that's a topic for a completely different video, but that completely turned upside down this whole idea that because we have brains, then we're sentient. And I don't even want to get into what the metaphysical implications of this sort of thing could be, right? Well, I'm sure there's a scientific explanation for all of this, because science. Fuck you. Fucking you scientists, you believers of scientism are so fucking ignorant, bigoted, and annoying as fuck. It's ridiculous, man. Mike the Headless Chicken. Head cut off. Lived for 18 months. The way some of you clowns be speaking, I mean, you might as well be a headless fucking chicken. Some of the shit that you're saying, you remind me of, I've said this in the past. This is where this comes from. chicken running around with his head cut off, right? There are tons and tons of accounts of people being deemed clinically dead, right? And then coming back to life. Tons of these accounts of this happening, right? So why couldn't it have happened in Jesus' case? Why not? Why not? Science! Oh, then this guy has a problem with Jesus turning water into wine. I mean, and he talks about peer review, right? Well, when it comes to science, we have peer review. My question to you is, if you seem to put so much faith in peer review, has the process, the peer review process, has that passed peer review? If not, then, which it hasn't, by the way, then you just debunked yourself, right? Because in order for something to be valid in this realm of science, it needs to pass peer review. And if the process that's called peer review never passed peer review, then it's invalid, according to you, right? Okay. Look, I'm not going to play this video because, copyright and shit, but go on ahead, check it out. This dude turns water into wine. He turns it into coffee. He turns it into all these other things. And all these people are there to confirm it, right? Peer review. Insofar as you're concerned, I mean, this is better than any scientific study because there's actually a camera there to record it, right? But you're going to say this is bullshit, it's a trick, it's this and that. And then you're going to read some, words on a piece of paper and you're going to say that's true. This not only is this peer-reviewed science, it is. It's an experiment, scientific experiment that's peer-reviewed, right? You actually get to see it, recorded live. I wish we could see that when it comes to, science and viruses and stuff like that. Let me see what this virus does in the body. Oh, wait, you don't have the technology to be able to do that. But this is what viruses do in the human body because I say so. Something that's never been recorded, science says is possible. This is recorded. Water being turned into wine. It's not possible. Like, you have a double standard, homie? And besides, have you ever bothered to look up the recipe for wine? I had it somewhere, but I don't have it here. I'm not going to waste your time. You could go look this up, right? One of the main ingredients, I don't know if you know this, into making wine, one of the ingredients of wine is, wait for it, water. So, what do you mean you can't turn water into wine when all wine requires water, right? I mean, that's science, bro. That's just basic fucking science. Yeah, you need other things. Oh, so sorry Bible doesn't mention. And look, I'm not telling you that this is how you should interpret the Bible. You do whatever makes you happy. But if that's your standard, yeah, you're so super rational. And the same guy in the comments admits that the Bible has been rewritten and redacted and edited, right? So, and on top of that, it's been translated. So maybe a lot has gotten lost in the translation. On top of that, it's fucking poetry, man. Right? This guy admits all of that. And then yet he takes it literally, right? When he says that the literal reading of the Bible is for idiots, and yet he reads it literally, proving that he's an idiot. You're just debunking yourself, bro. You have a peer-reviewed scientific experiment recorded where a guy turns water into wine. You have millions of scientific experiments that have been conducted and confirmed that prove that you need water to make wine. Yeah. And then you're expecting the Bible to be a fucking brewer's guide or something like that when at the same time you're saying it's been redacted, it's something's been lost in translation, and I will add to that, which should be obvious, that it's also poetry, right? Like, you're not making any sense, dude. You're expecting the Bible to be a fucking brewer's guide when we know it's a religious book written in poetry, translated many times over, right? Over thousands of years now. You think something maybe got lost in the translation? You're saying people who read the Bible literally are idiots or naive or whatever, and then you're using the literal reading of the Bible to debunk it. Like, holy fucking shit, man. And then you're saying these things that just aren't true. Yeah, a lot of people have deified George Washington, right? But you're going to take that and dismiss that and say, oh, that's just, poetry. It's hyperbole. It's a myth, right? But when it comes to Jesus, all of that has to be true. What people say has to be true, even though you reject the literal reading of the Bible. When it's convenient, you accept it, and all of it has to be true, or he didn't exist, as if that was even a logical argument. You can't even be logical. You're not making any sense. And all these things that you say are impossible, somehow they keep happening. Chickens running around with their heads fucking cut off for 18 months. People resurrected from the dead, insofar as we can tell. Now, maybe there's a scientific explanation for that, but we don't have it. You think they had that 2,000 years ago? And I'm not saying that that's even what happened. But maybe it did, and that's how people explain it to themselves, because, to this day we can't explain it. So maybe it is a miracle. I mean, we've had 2,000 years since then of science that's supposed to explain everything, and it fails to explain why people are resurrected. Until you could provide an explanation, pipe the fuck down, Mr. Scientist, and let people believe what they will. Seeing as most of what you believe is pure fucking belief. Anyway, you just call it scientific. What's the difference? What's the difference between this quote-unquote magician turning water into wine and a scientific study that you say you've read? What's the difference? Well, this is far, far, far higher level of proof. Not only is it peer-reviewed, a scientific experiment that's peer-reviewed. Yeah, it is. It is. It's also been recorded for you live to see. Now, sure, you could turn around and say it was all set up and all these people are lying, right? Okay, we'll hold the same fucking standard for science, dummy. Thanks for watching.